In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills, there lived a young man named Ethan. Ethan was an ordinary person with an extraordinary dream. He wanted to become a marathon runner. Not just any runner, but someone who could inspire others to chase their dreams. The challenge? Ethan had never run a day in his life. He worked long hours at the local hardware store, coming home every evening too exhausted to think about anything other than dinner and sleep. His life was a routine of responsibilities, and while he dreamed of running, he kept telling himself, maybe someday. One crisp autumn morning, as Ethan walked to work, he saw a group of runners training in the park. They laughed, encouraged one another, and seemed so full of life. Something stirred inside him. That evening, he sat on his old couch, staring at his worn-out sneakers. What if I just try, he thought. The next morning, Ethan set his alarm an hour earlier than usual. When it buzzed, he groaned, tempted to hit snooze. But he forced himself out of bed, laced up his sneakers, and stepped outside into the chilly dawn. The streets were quiet, the air fresh. He began to jog. Or at least he tried. After 2 minutes, he was gasping for breath, his legs burning. He stopped, leaning against a lamppost. Maybe I'm not cut out for this, he thought. But then he looked at the horizon, where the sun was rising, painting the sky with fiery hues. Felt like a sign. Everyone starts somewhere, he whispered to himself. He walked home, vowing to try again. Days turned into weeks. Ethan's progress was slow, but it was progress. His neighbors began to notice him jogging every morning. Some waved, others offered kind words, yet doubts lingered. One evening, as he stretched after a run, an elderly man named Mr. Harris approached him. Mr. Harris was a retired teacher who had lived in the town for decades. He smiled and said, "You remind me of a story I used to tell my students." Ethan, curious, asked, "What story?" Mr. Harris began, "There was once a man who wanted to light a candle in a dark cave. Each time he struck a match, the wind would blow it out. But he didn't give up. He kept striking matches until, finally, one lit the candle. That single flame chased away the darkness." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the metaphor. "So, you're saying I need to keep trying?" "Exactly," Mr. Harris said. "Every step you take is a match. Eventually, you'll light your candle." Inspired, Ethan doubled his efforts. He read about running techniques, adjusted his diet, and even joined a local running club. The other runners welcomed him warmly, sharing tips and cheering him on. His endurance improved. He began to enjoy the rhythm of his feet against the pavement, the wind on his face, and the sense of accomplishment after each run. However, setbacks came too. One icy winter morning, Ethan slipped on a patch of ice, twisting his ankle. As he lay on the ground, pain shooting through his leg, he felt defeated. Back home, with his foot elevated and wrapped, he spiraled into doubt. Maybe this is a sign to quit, he thought. That evening, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah, a runner from his club. "Hey Ethan, we missed you today. Remember, setbacks are just setups for comebacks. See you soon." Her words reignited his determination. He began physical therapy, focused on healing, and returned to running stronger than before. Months passed, and the town's annual marathon approached. Ethan signed up, his heart pounding with nerves. On race day, the streets buzzed with excitement. Spectators lined the route, cheering for the runners. Ethan stood at the starting line, surrounded by seasoned athletes. Doubts crept in, but he pushed them aside, remembering Mr. Harris's story. "This is my chance to light the candle," he thought. The race began. Ethan paced himself, focusing on each step. The crowd's cheers fueled him, but by the halfway mark, fatigue set in. His legs felt like lead, his breath ragged. As he considered stopping, he heard a familiar voice. "Keep going, Ethan." It was Mr. Harris, standing with a group of neighbors. They clapped and shouted encouragement. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes. "I can do this," he told himself. With renewed energy, he pushed forward. The final stretch was the hardest, his body screaming in protest. But as the finish line came into view, the cheers grew louder. He crossed it, collapsing into a heap, his heart bursting with pride. Ethan didn't win the marathon, but he achieved something far greater. He proved to himself and others that persistence lights the way, even in the darkest times. His journey inspired many in the town to chase their own dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. And as Ethan stood on the podium, receiving a medal for Most Inspirational Runner, he looked at the crowd and said, "The candle is lit. Now it's your turn." Every dream starts with a single step. No matter how many times you stumble or fall, remember that persistence and belief in yourself can light the way to success.